Hello and welcome back to the channel. Celestial Guardians has been out for a week now, and I want to take a look at the meta and see what decks are performing in the top tournaments this past week. So whether you're prepping for a tournament yourself or you're looking to optimize your own personal list, here are the decks that you should be looking at and keeping your eye on moving forward. And yes, I am wearing a mushroom hat with a mushroom hoodie. Thank you for noticing. Now let's take a look at the decks. The first deck on our list is Solgaleo, and we kind of knew this was coming, right? Solgaleo just has a crazy stat line, super high HP, incredible ability, and a 2 energy attack cost, so it makes it super aggressive and super fast to get online. The recoil damage is not even that bad. If you attach a cape to Solgaleo, then you have 200 HP, which means you're pretty tanky. And then if you can set up 2 Solgaleos, I think you're doing just fine. If you checked out my recent video with Solgaleo, you would have seen that I tried to test Solgaleo with a bunch of different partners, and it seems like the community has agreed that Skarmory is probably the best partner for Solgaleo, and it makes sense, right? It's a basic, so you can lead with it. 1 energy attack. If you put a tool on it, you're hitting for 50. It's so efficient, alongside with Solgaleo, who is efficient on its own, makes the deck super aggressive and super easy to get online. Other options you can try are the Excadrill, like I said in my video, and then also my personal favorite is Snorlax because of the Snorlax berry tech. So you can have Snorlax tanking hits in the active, and then if you have 2 energies on it, you can use berry to reduce your 4 energy cost to 2 energy cost, which means you can attack for 100, which is really great. So if you are opting to play the Snorlax version of the build, you should try including the Pokemon Center Lady as well, because that makes it so that when your Snorlax is asleep, you can cure that status condition. And then also it's just passive healing for your Solgaleo as well to kind of mitigate that damage recoil. The only issue that I noticed with this deck is that 120 is pretty low in terms of damage ceiling. We do have tools like Rocky Helmet and Barb to help push that a little bit further, and Skarmory is also there to help fix the math on certain KOs as well. The next deck is one that you probably have seen on the ladder, and that's because it just won the most recent Ursi Day tournament, beating out 1,000 people, and that is Giratina with Snorlax and Greninja. This deck is really great because you have a bunch of different attacking options. You have the Snorlax berry tech, like I mentioned with Solgaleo. You can attack with Greninja because you're running water energies, and then you have Giratina, which we all know can accelerate psychic energy to itself. So 3 different attackers and a lot of different options. The combo with Greninja pings alongside the Giratina hitting for 130 means you can pressure a lot of threats that your opponents could be setting up, and this deck has a pretty crazy win percentage with 63%, but it's also relatively a new deck, so I think we'll have to see it compete in a couple more tournaments before we can actually see its matchup spread. So far this deck has an answer to most things. The only issue that I see is its lack of mobility. We don't run Leaf in the deck, so you might have some really awkward starts, but if you just manage your energy pretty efficiently, then I think you can get out of most sticky situations. Now, I want to talk about Darkrai Giratina. Yes, it is still around, and funnily enough, there are no new cards from the new set in the deck list. It's just that good. Now, there are some new techs. We do play Mars and Red Card to help disrupt our opponent because it's such a stage 2 heavy meta. That a little bit of tempo shift can make it so that you can set up before your opponents can set up any of their stage 2s. I also saw some lists playing the new Oricorio, which acts as like a pseudo Druddigon, which lets you wall EXs while you're setting up your Darkrai and Giratina on the bench. Now, if you don't play the bird, then you need ways to heal because your Darkrai or Giratina they're going to be in the active spot taking hits. So we do play Pokemon Center Lady and Potion to help with that. And then I also saw some variants playing Guzma to help with any tool shenanigans. I personally think Guzma is a really great card, especially if tools are going to be more relevant and they're going to release more tools in the future, but we'll have to see how relevant tools are currently with certain breakpoints. So I think it's going to take a little bit more testing to see whether or not we need to tech Guzma, but I think that most decks should have a flex spot for Guzma going down the line. And yes, people are still playing Darkrai with Greninja. The chip damage is just really good between the two, and the synergy is just really great. I think any version of Darkrai, Giratina, and Greninja is just going to be a really strong deck right now. You might have issues retreating from time to time, which is why we run Leaf. I think Leaf is a staple in this deck, and this is just a deck that is high reward and it punishes opponents that set up really slowly. Now, Rampardos has gotten a big boost in this set with Rare Candy. Before, we had to try and find all of our pieces, the Fossil, the Cranidos, and the Rampardos in order to get set up, but now Rare Candy just makes that so much easier. We are also seeing a lot of different ways to play Rampardos, and one of them is with the Garchomp EX. Now, this deck is really great because you're guaranteeing Gibble starts because you don't play any other basics besides the Gibble. Now, we are playing the Dragon type Gibble just because grass decks are actually relevant right now, so you don't want to get donked by a random grass deck attacking you. But once you do set up Garchomp EX, linear attack is really strong, hitting 50 for anywhere on the board, and that can help you set up some pretty nice KOs for Rampardos down the line. Now, another new way that you can build this deck is with the Midnight form Lycanroc, which for 2 energies allows you to hit anything for 100 damage if they have more HP than you, so that's pretty strong. And then you can also just use Rampardos to clean up those KOs. We've also seen other versions of the deck with Aerodactyl EX, which is really strong because it prevents your opponent from evolving, which can be pretty devastating for a lot of stage 2 decks, so that could help shift the tempo in your favor so that you can set up your Rampardos before your opponents can set up their stage 2s. And of course, we have the Lucario, which is a staple in most fighting decks, allowing your Rampardos to hit for 150 damage, which is crazy for just 1 energy, and making it so that you're playing a single prize deck as opposed to playing any EXs that give away 2 points. The only issue with this deck that I foresee is that grass can get a little bit more popular down the line with a lot of these new grass type attackers that we're seeing, so you might run into some weaknesses here and there depending on which version of this build that you're building. And then also the other thing is fossils are always going to be tricky, right? You can't get around that aspect of the card, so you do have to find your fossil first, then candy Rampardos. So that's one of the reasons why Iono in this deck is really important to help you find all your combo pieces. Incineroar is a card that I personally wasn't expecting to be a meta contender, but is actually doing really well, and for good reason, because you can pair it up with cards like the Shining Revelry Charizard, which has a Stoke attack, allowing it to accelerate energy to itself, and then you can hit for 150 every turn, which is nuts. And then you can set up your Incineroar on the back as like a late game attacker. You run 2 Lilies in this deck, allowing your Incineroar and Charizard to live for longer and consistently hitting damage. You also play red so that your 150s and your 140s can go up to 170s and 160s, which is really nuts. You're also hitting Solgaleo and other grass decks for weakness, so you have a lot of key points that keeps this deck really strong and really relevant against certain matchups. Now, my own personal concern with most of these stage 2 decks is that you are playing 2 stage 2s, which means you can get some bricky hands, but we do play Iono and Pokemon Communication, so that can help fix our hand at certain points in the match. But if you want to play a different version of this deck, you can also opt to play the maybe if I can say that. You could play the Turtonator version of this build, which is really strong as well because you can use Turtonator as a wall while you're setting up your Incineroar. You can also play Kiawe, which, if you don't know, allows you to attach 2 fire energy to your Turtonator, but your turn ends, which isn't really that big of a deal, especially at the start of the match, because you're trying to set up anyway, so you're not attacking right away. So you'll use Kiawe to set up your Turtonator while you're setting up your Incineroar on the back. You can attack with Turtonator, so you're hitting for 90. Now, you do discard an energy from Turtonator, so at some point, you're going to have to choose whether or not you want to continue attacking with the Turtonator, or if you want to just focus on the Incineroar in the back. That just really depends on the board state and how the flow of the game is going. Meowscarada is a really great card, especially in this meta if you're going up against a Darkrai, because you are knocking out Darkrai in 1 hit. It can soften up a lot of other EXs as well, and then you also just have the new Leaf Cape, which adds to the survivability of a lot of these grass type attackers in this deck. Sprigatito is definitely our go-to starter for this deck because it has the attack Cry for Help, allowing you to grab any grass Pokemon and putting it into your hand. So this does help with the fact that we are running 2 stage 2s in 1 deck, so it makes it a little bit easier to set those up. So because of that, you can run Meowscarada with cards like Serena. Serena is really great because for 1 energy, you could potentially hit for 150, emphasis on potentially because it is 3 coin flips. You could also play it with Mallow. Mallow is really great because it allows you to just heal all the damage off of Serena. You do have to discard the energy, but that doesn't matter because it's only 1 energy, so you could just reattach and go at it again. But because there is that variance with Serena, you could opt to play it with other grass type attackers like the Beedrill EX that we saw a lot of in the last format. You could also play it with Decidueye EX, the new card that we got in the set, which is really great because if Meowscarada failed to KO an EX, you can use Decidueye to snipe that EX anywhere on the board, so that's actually really strong pairing. Now the main issue with this deck is the fact that Serena has to flip 3 coins in order to do any damage, and those could all be tails, so that's not really ideal. The other issue with this deck is that if you're going up against a non-EX deck, then your damage potential does drop quite significantly because you're only hitting for 60 with Meowscarada, and then with Serena you may not even hit at all. So it might be better to pair Meowscarada with one of the EXs that we talked about, so the Beedrill or the Decidueye, just so that we have some consistent attackers as well as the Meowscarada. Now I want to talk about Decidueye on its own real quick because it definitely has a lot of potential, and I think it's going to be a really great card as we get more partners for it. One really great synergy obviously is with the Greninja. Greninja is such a great card as we have seen in these other deck lists, but it also has really great synergy with Decidueye because it allows you to have freedom with your Pierce the Pain attack, allowing you to hit anything on your opponent's board with the Greninja chip damage. The other thing that works really well is that Decidueye Pierce the Pain attack is 2 colorless energies, so you could just run water in this deck, and that means that you can also utilize Greninja as an attacker as well as the Decidueye. Now some people are sticking with the Lurantis version of this build, and I think Lurantis is totally fine. There is synergy there, but personally from my testing, I didn't find Lurantis to be that impactful just because you're spending an attack to hit everything for 20. Your opponent may not even have everything that they need in play on their field, and there's just so much healing in the format as well, so whatever they're setting up as their big threat, they could just heal it off, and then you can't really use Pierce the Pain anymore. But I think the Greninja is really great because it allows you to use an ability to set up Pierce the Pain and then still attack with Pierce the Pain all in one turn, as opposed to having to set up the Lurantis, then attack with the Lurantis, then hope that they didn't heal the damage, and then come in with Decidueye and then Pierce the Pain. And I personally tried a tank slash healing version of the build utilizing cards like Lily and Leaf Cape alongside Shaman to keep my Decidueyes out and alive for longer, allowing me to not only tank hits but then also sniping all the things that I've been hitting over the past couple of turns, and I found really great success with that. So if you want to check that video out, that's going to be on my channel as well. But again, this deck list has 2 stage 2s, so once you get past those early turns of setting up, then you can really set some really great combo plays with the Decidueye and the Greninja. Arceus is making a resurgence as well. Arceus is a really great card, and if you pair it with Crobat, which you can now set up really easily with the rare candy, allowing you to chip away at your opponent's active Pokemon for 30 every turn, is just no joke. And then you also have Carnivine, which allows you to hit for 50 for just 1 energy, making it a super cheap early game attacker while you're setting up your Arceus on the bench. So it's a really great combo with these 3. Now the one caveat about this deck is that you have to have Arceus in order to activate any of these link abilities, so there is some sort of order of operations with this deck. And then the other thing to note is that this deck struggles against Rampardos and also just fighting decks in general, just because Arceus and Crobat are weak to fighting. So just look out for that if you're trying to pilot this deck. Now this one is sneaky good. The Crabominable EX is actually a really great card because you can attack for just 1 energy and hit for 40, but then afterwards you're constantly hitting for 80 turn after turn after turn. And then if you pair this with Greninja, of course we know how good Greninja is, it just increases that damage ceiling further, and it also gives you a secondary attack to kind of counter Oricorio as well. We do play cards like Irida and Cape to make our Crab even tankier because it does want to sit in the active spot in order to constantly hit that 80 turn after turn. But be mindful, we don't have anything in this list that allows us to hit for a big amount of damage, so we do have Cyrus in order to chase down our opponent's mons that we've hit for 80 in order to secure KOs. Now, one weakness to note is that if your opponent does use something like Cyrus or Sabrina, it does reset that insatiable striking attack, meaning you have to come back in and hit for 40 and then ramp up to 80, making it so that you're a turn behind in that damage. Now, it is just one turn, but that one turn could make a difference in winning or losing that match, so just keep that in mind. Now we have the infamous Oricorio, the EX Slayer, if you will. Now, Oricorio is really interesting because it's essentially an auto win against decks who don't properly tech for Oricorio, so that is a cheeky way to catch your opponent off guard. We do also run the Magnezone line, which is a really great line, as we have seen in past metas, being run in a lot of decks that weren't even lightning and just letting it accelerate energy to itself passively. You can do the same in this deck. You can use Oricorio to kind of wall and chip away with 50 using Zap, and then you can just come in with the Magnezone and then just clean up KOs afterwards. There is a version of this deck that is running the Luxray with Volkner so that you can snipe back to back, which I think is a really cool strategy. And then this version of the list is running 2 Guzma in order to get rid of tools that can potentially hurt your Oricorio despite its ability, like the Rocky Helmet or the Poison Barb. Your main strategy with this deck is to exhaust all of your opponent's non-EX attackers. If they are running EX mons, you force them in a position where they have to play those EXs, and then you come in with the Oricorio to kind of stall them and then chip away at them with Zap when they have no other options remaining. Now, before you go and play this all over the ladder, just remember that Rampardos is a nightmare of a matchup alongside other fighting decks, and also a lot of decks are teching non-EX attackers, as we've seen in most of these meta decks, so it may not be as smooth sailing as you may think, so just keep that in mind. Now, I was going to stop with Oricorio, but I actually saw this deck list on Limitless with a decent win percentage, so I wanted to give it a look, and that is the Togekiss. Togekiss can take advantage of rare candy, which is really great, and also it has a similar attack to the Crabominable, where you're hitting for 60 and then you're constantly ramping your damage and hitting for 120 every turn, which is really nice. You're also playing cards like the Cynthia, which allows you to increase that damage to 170, which is nuts. And then you're also playing other attackers like the Farfetch and the Tapu Lele. I'm assuming those are just to poke damage on your opponent's board so that the Togekiss can clean up as well. I think that's a really cool combo. I would actually like to see a version of this deck list with the new Oricorio that has the revenge attack as opposed to the Farfetch, so I might actually try that version out for myself. And one of the reasons why I want to showcase this deck specifically is because it may not be a high meta share, there may not be a lot of decks playing it, it may not be performing super well in the meta, but it does have a decent win rate, and it is a reminder that there are a lot of stage 2 mons that we have yet to explore from past sets, so there are a lot of opportunities in order to bring back older stage 2 Pokemons and seeing how they work in this meta, and I think the Togekiss is actually a really great example of that. And that's the breakdown of some of the top meta decks in this format. As you can see, there are a lot of decks that have been thoroughly tested and are finding their groove, and there are a lot of decks with a lot of different variants, and we're still trying to figure out what is the correct 20 cards to play that is optimal. It's only the first week, so I imagine that the meta is going to adapt and evolve as people start to explore and experiment with new ways to play certain decks. Let me know down in the comment section what decks you are currently running or struggling against. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Pokemon Pocket content, and I will catch you guys later. My personal favorite, did I say a sentence? It felt like I blacked out.